Hey guys, so we are going to be back looking at the new heroes, well, new reworked heroes anyways, and we're going to be looking at some competitive level play. Previously I did 2 videos on my own play with the Rainer and the Anduin, but keep in mind I've been kind of playing on a Smurf. In those videos I was getting close to Masters, but those weren't really that competitive of matches, and they weren't the greatest matches to show. This is actually a competitive match after the rework in CCL for Stitches, and then I will have a Vala rework video coming out as well. I will mention in the Vala rework video that balance is going to be adjusted a little bit, but here we're going to be watching Justing play Stitches, and this is the new Stitches. This has the activatable trait Shambling Horror, which you can activate to spread your vile gas in the area, increase your movement speed to 110%, and also make it to where your movement speed cannot go lower than 110%. You also will have your passive trait, which is that vile gas. If you melee attack someone, you apply the vile gas, lasts 3 seconds, does very light damage, does a little bit more damage to minions, mercs, everything like that. But overall, pretty insignificant as far as the trait portion of it itself. The activatable is very strong, and the trait portion can give you armor with patchwork creation. So if you need to get a lot of armor quickly, you can always activate this, apply your vile gas to a lot of the enemies and get a lot of armor. Level 1, he takes patchwork creation. So there's a lot of debate about the level 1 talents, purely because Savor the Flavor can give a lot of value as the game goes on. Hungry for More can give a lot of value as the game goes on. But what I will point out is that patchwork creation is the best, assuming that things are going bad. It's the best assuming that things are even. And even if you're stomping the enemies, it's the best talent, because if you're stomping the enemies, they're going to stay far away from you and you're not going to get a lot of opportunities for Savor the Flavor. If you're behind, then it's going to be too risky to stack Savor the Flavor. So I recommend Savor the Flavor only in the solo lane where you can safely stack it against a single target each time, where patchwork creation gets value in just about every situation. So despite the fact there is still some debate on his talents, I think the level 1 is almost always going to be patchwork creation unless there's any adjustments. There's some really good body blocking by the enemy Deathwing right there. As we get to level 4, there's also some debate going around. Like, I have Vile Cleaver saved, but I'm actually switching that to Tenderizer in my own personal recommendations for people. The reasoning for this is because this is 2 very good talents that got watered down and put together. Even for how much they got watered down, it's still really good. Basic attacks slow the enemy hero and restore a percentage of your health. It's just a really good talent with a lot baked in. However, Vile Cleaver is good, especially if you're going to be taking Patchwork Creation, because you're going to be applying more Vile Gas, and you're going to be doing getting more armor, and you'll have more wave clear. So if you need to be able to double soak, Vile Cleaver speeds that up. If you're going to be more focusing on team fight, Tenderizer's better. And if you need to take the level 16 W talent, is where you'll take Playtime. And that's a completely different build. But that's the build that we're going to be seeing today that Justing is playing. Now, we'll see the name Pit Kid here. That's just his in-game name right now that he's running on in CCL. Most people know him by Justing. He's been a tank player in the competitive environment since HTC. Yeah, so if you're going to take the level 16 to slow people by 80%, decrease their armor by 10, then you want to get the cooldown reduction, where you can lower the cooldown of your W, and with the inner area of your slam, and also with basic attacks. The level 4 talents are mostly underwhelming, so it's very important that you base it off of what your build is supposed to do later in the game. So, we'll come back to the build and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but let's talk about the playstyle. Stitches has a very big body, so a lot of what you're going to be trying to do this game is body blocking, hooking, and just being a presence that the enemy has to deal with. Because of his rework, he has a lot more survivability, and he can be a lot scarier when he just walks into the enemy team, to the point that a lot of people are shying away from Gorge and moving more into grabbing Bile, because you can slow everyone and kind of move past them at the same time, and the enemies have to make a choice. Do they try to run past you through Bile to get to your backline, or Do they just try to kill you, but you're so much tankier than you used to be? It kind of puts them in a situation where there's no right answer, and you are actually in a really, really good spot for short fights. Level 7, we see Second Helping. In my opinion, this is one of the strongest talents in his tier. What this talent does is it gives you 2 charges of your Devour with a 6-second cooldown in between them. This allows you to get a big heal at the start of a fight and a big heal at about the middle of a fight. The secondary thing that this does is a lone talent that is not really necessary, but it is kind of a nice bonus for early to middle game fights, where if you heal yourself above your max health, then you will get a 15% shield, equivalent to 15% of your max health as a shield. And then this decreases by 3% per death. But the reason why this is so powerful is because you can start a fight and you can do a quick Devour as you lose like your first 10% of your health, gain 10%, then gain a giant shield that makes you hard to deal with for the start of a fight, and then you'll last long enough to get your second helping and go again. And then when you go again, it becomes to the point that the enemies generally can't deal with you in a standard meta composition, which is why Stitches can be so powerful in this build. And then if you combine that with the extra healing of Tenderizer, potentially Meat Hook, and resetting those heals from Meat Hook, you can be almost an unkillable force as Stitches, reminiscent of like the auto attack Diablo build that I've talked about and I've shown before. You can be extraordinarily tanky, but you have this ability to kind of force the enemies to attack you by jumping in their team with Bile or even with Gorge. So that's the starting build. You can see he's not going for a lot of hooks in the beginning, and they do also have a great counter pick to Stitches. So if you're seeing a lot of Stitches, I think Deathwing's a pretty good counter, because what Deathwing does is Deathwing creates a giant body that can stand in front of his team that can block hooks. And that makes it to where Deathwing is a very, very good option for answering Stitches. There is a little bit of a counter you can do if you're playing Stitches against a Deathwing. It's not a great counter, but level 7, some people are changing to Serrated Edge against a Deathwing, so that if you do hit the Deathwing, your cooldown's lowered by your hook, and you also do 5% of his max health. So keep that in mind, that the new Stitches build, while there are a lot of opportunities in different directions, there's one that kind of stands above the rest. There's one particular build, but then there's a lot of adaptations to that build. Like, you can go a W variant, you can go an E variant, or you can go into more of a hook variant. And all of those are definitely options that you can do. So you can see the early portions of the game are relatively even. He's just looking for hooks, he's covering the macro for his team, but he's not doing anything overwhelming throughout this this early portion of the game. We're going to fast forward just a little bit. He goes in for a flank, but again, without having Bile, even without having Gorge up, you can't do much on Stitches. I believe he ends up getting his first death relatively early. He does have that increased healing, so it's kind of okay if he decides to stay around a little bit, because he can munch on something, or he can have his Stukov cover him as well. So if you are playing with his Stitches and you're curious about what could benefit your team, I always like having something that has a reliable follow-up to Stitches. You'll see in the competitive scene a lot of Malfurions with Stitches, where the Stitches will throw the hook and the Malfurion will drop the root. So when you hook someone in, they immediately get rooted when the hook ends. And that's a possibility. Another one that that works really well in Storm League, but not so much in competitive, just because it's often banned in competitive, is Uther. I really like Uther because you don't need to commit any abilities unless Stitches lands the hook. So you just stand a little bit in front of Stitches when he's about to hook, or as he's throwing out the hook, you step forward. If he lands it, then you'll be in between the target and Stitches, and or in between Stitches. The target will be in between you and Stitches, and you can immediately stun, double stun, triple stun, whatever you need to do to kill that target. And so that's why I really like running Uther with Stitches. I think it's a really solid combo. But just think about what you can do to follow up the hook, generally with CC and with Burst. If you're in the mage role, I really like KT, Kill Thos, for following up Stitches. Whenever Stitches goes for a hook, you just immediately go for your trait E, so you get the longer duration stun. Then you throw a W and a Q, and with Stitches auto attacking, you generally lead to a kill. So we do hit that level 13. He takes Meat Hook. You might be asking me, well, Paradox, why is he going for Meat Hook instead of Under Pressure when he's going the W variant of this build? And I'm going to tell you right now that this is not really that big of a talent. Your W damage is not that huge. Increasing your W damage isn't that big of a deal. But Meat Hook can be pretty incredible. Meat Hook is equivalent to about 5% of your health per second as long as it's going. It goes for 4 seconds naturally, but every basic attack refreshes the entire 4-second duration once again. So as long as you're getting a hook at some point in a fight, and you get an auto attack at least once every 4 seconds, you're going to be having a really high flat health regen. If you're ever wondering about how high of a flat health regen you have, standard regen for a high health hero at this level is about 12, right? If we were to pull out a calculator and we were to calculate 5%, which calculator disappeared on me. Let's say, I've got a lot of calculators out. Let's go, his health is 5,300. And we're going to multiply that by 0.05, and that's 265 health per second. Which, if you look at his health, that's increasing his health regen by 20 times. And that's an incredible amount of health regen. In fact, a lot of damage dealers around this time only do about 400 to 500 DPS. So the fact that you can take about half of the enemy DPS and drop it, not to mention the potential armor that you might have, or the extra healing that you have, and your healer is still available. There's so many other things that are going on. It makes it to where you're basically unkillable against a lot of enemy heroes because of this talent and this talent right here. As long as you take second helping and Meat Hook, you're very, very hard to kill, and the rest of your build is mostly irrelevant. You don't necessarily even need to take second helping. You lose a lot of survivability, but you could kind of gain the lower cooldown on Hook if you're against a Deathwing and you just need that opportunity. But yeah, this is kind of where it's at. And you can see he does a lot of ambitious hooks. I think that there's a lot that we could learn from other Stitches players as well, because there's a lot of hooks that he doesn't try for. One of my favorite hooks in this map is you stand in this bush and you can hook past this gate, and you can grab someone that might be here. You could even walk up to here and hook directly down and get someone that might be hiding under or like right behind walls. So your team could be ready to immediately follow up. And there's a lot of opportunities like that. Stitches is generally picked on this map because there's going to be a lot of time where people are going to be on the objective channeling, and then you can hook them and set up for a fight. And those are some of the best maps for Stitches, are maps that people have to channel on a point and you can simply just hook them. With that being said, as we start approaching level 16, there's 2 directions that you can go. If you took second helping, you're safe to take digestive juices. But you only really want to take digestive juices in a few scenarios. One, if there's a frontliner that you need to lower their damage. So in this particular case, they're running kind of a Deathwing in the front line. We could reduce his damage by 50%. Keep in mind he has like weird spell power based on his trait, so it's not going to be exactly 50%, but you get the point. And you could reduce the damage of like an Illidan or a Butcher or anything that could be really valuable up front. If they only have tanks up front, you don't need this talent. It can be a really good talent, but you don't necessarily need this talent. But I will say that this talent combined with second helping is very strong, because you have your 2 charges, and each charge is going to shave off 5 seconds of your cooldown, reduce the damage of someone, deal additional damage over time. They synergize really well together. You don't need the level 1 talent, just the second helping and digestive juices synergize really well together. However, if you do have playtime and you have pulverize can slow people by 80%, making it easier to land your hooks, and then you can lower the cooldown of it so that as they're trying to run away after the hook, you can lower their damage again, or lower their movement speed again. And so both of these talents are very good, but if you're going to take Pulverize, you need to take Playtime. And if you're going to take Digestive Juices, you need to take Second Helping. But you can, if you took both of these talents, both options are available at level 16. You just kind of decide which one you think is going to be more valuable. I find the more backliners, the more valuable Pulverize is, the more frontliners, the more valuable Digestive Juices are. that's my personal rule of thumb, but I know a lot of people have their own flavors for handling those talent choices. Again, ambitious hooks, but I wouldn't say he's made any major plays off of the hook itself. Why I wanted to use this particular video is because it shows how just the tankiness of Stitches in his current state make him very, very strong. The enemies don't really have a lot of answers to what he's bringing to this game. Like, they just don't. They don't have a lot of ways to actually put pressure on Stitches in the front line. So they have to attack his back line, and it's only a matter of time before he is slowing or stunning you to the point that you can't really react to it. So where his hooks aren't that strong, I wanted to show this particular game because I wanted you guys to see that you can play Stitches even if you're bad at hooking. Now, Justing is not bad at hooking. Remember that they've countered what his pick was for the hooks by running Deathwing in the 4-man to answer those hooks. They also have Mei, who can use their trait. They've done everything they can to counter his hooking ability, and he still brings so much to the team. So I'm not telling you that this player is bad at hooking. And I'm not saying that you should not learn all the great angles to hook from, which are generally out of sight. If you can hook people from out of sight, if you're standing here and you try to hook this guy, he's going to move down. But if you're standing here and you hook him, he's not going to see the hook until it's too late, and then he's going to get caught. So hooking people from over walls or from angles they don't expect to get hooked from, that's going to be very valuable, and that's going to be something that you guys should definitely learn from. Even that, he was able to hook out of vision range. And this is pretty huge. I mean, this is the exact reason why you draft Stitches on this map. Is because people are channeling, you have vision on them, they don't have vision on you, you hook them from really far away, your team gets a kill, and you can then look for other opportunities. In this case, they're going to take out Ibtings, and he's going to go for one more pretty ambitious hook, but their team was able to get so much value off of that. Falstad grabbed the bottom objective, he hooked to prevent the right objective, they're going to grab the right objective, they're going to grab the left objective, they had control over bot lane because of his earlier tankiness that we saw, and now he's at a spot where he has given such huge value to their team. I mean, that this objective right here was the equivalent of, what, like 15 damage, I think? So that is quite a bit. Now, as we're approaching level 20, there are a lot of directions you can go, but there's not as much debate as you would think. Most people don't like hungry Stitches in the competitive environment because you're going to generally be hooking and then gorging, and you don't want people to pop out all together because, and yet at different times, because you can't wombo off of that, but it might also cause you guys to lose the targets that you're going for. So if you went Gorge, it's generally Master Hooker. Reduces the cooldown of Hook by 5 seconds. I apologize, that's my phone. I normally have that on silent. This lowers the cooldown baseline, whether or not you hit the hook. Then it also does two things. Enemy heroes hit will have 100% reduced healing, and ally heroes hit will be unkillable for 2 seconds. And so it's a really great way against potentially double heal comps to pull someone away from a double heal comp, and then even if they try to use their own healing abilities, they just die. And it's also pretty interesting as far as the unkillable aspect, because if you're against something like a Malthael who's about to kill a target and you've got your hook available, you could quickly helping hand hook your team to save them from the Malthael. Now, on top of this talent, there is a lot of debate over the Putrid Bile upgrade, which is a talent that I really like, but keep my recommendation with a grain of salt that Master Hooker is such a good talent that even though I think this is a great talent, it's still very competitive with Master Hooker. So with that being said, we'll continue playing this, and I will say this is a great talent for Bile because it increases the damage of Bile. But the other thing that it does is it makes it to where each time that Bile damages an enemy hero, the duration of your next death timer is reduced by 2%, up to 80%. All stacks of this effect are lost upon death. Death timer after level 20 is generally about 60 seconds. So naturally, if we were to go back to our calculator, and hold on, let me find my calculator. I've got a million things up. We take a 60-second death timer and we multiply it by 0.2, and now you have a 12-second death timer. That's pretty good. And if you're on a map that you can abuse that, meaning a map that maybe you want to die at the start of an objective by helping your team lead to a kill and then come back and do it again, that's definitely a possibility. Now, Justin decided to go with Gas Bag, which is a talent that says activating Shambling Horror gives you unstoppable for 3 seconds and it drops the cooldown by 20 seconds. So now it's a 40-second cooldown and it will give him unstoppable for 3 seconds. It's pretty good if you are going to go Gorge because you can Gorge a target and then get unstoppable and kind of leave from there. But it's definitely one of those that I've said. It is debated at the highest levels right now on what level 20 is the 20 to go right now. As far as Storm League, I would say more often than not, I would probably recommend just going Bile and Gift of the Embalmer. Play up your tankiness and still look for some opportunity hooks. But I wouldn't really overcommit into any particular talent. In the competitive environment, I really think Master Hooker is solid. But I think there's definitely a lot to say about Gas Bag, especially if you go into Gorge. And those are Stitch's talents. The early game play is all about keeping up with macro, looking for opportunity hooks, and getting tanky. Mid game is all about abusing your tankiness as you're approaching the late game, and late game is even more so about those opportunity hooks because one pick with such long death timers is kind of already an objective that you've won. So that is your early game, your mid game, your late game. I may have another Stitches video if this one gets really popular about some good hook angles that you can look at from different maps. But I will give you basically the general rule of hooking targets that they can't see where your hook's coming from is going to be your priority. As well, I mean, even look at this. This is a 1v5 right here, basically. I mean, Misha, not necessarily, but 1v5, he's still lived for so long, burned one of his lone talents, but he's had those lone talents almost the entire game, and it's given him so much value. But yeah, Stitches has a really powerful range of levels. His largest power spike is going to be 7, 13. Well, I mean, of course, 10 is always a big power spike for everyone, but 7, 13, 16 are definitely going to be big for him, which makes him one of the few tanks that scales very well into the late game, which is something that a lot of tanks really struggle with. You can see, like, Garrosh is almost unkillable in the early game, and it's hard to focus on in the early game. He's devastating, but then he can absolutely blow up in the late game. The same is true with Anubarak. The same is true with, like, most other tanks, etc. I would say Murden and Stitches are some of the best scaling tanks in the game. But yeah, he's got a very unique playstyle as far as tanks go, and he's rather fun. So if Stitches is available in your Storm League games, maybe look at picking Stitches up just a little bit. Look for those opportunity hooks, but try to still use your front line. The thing that I used to not like about Stitches, and the reason why I didn't recommend him to a lot of people, was I didn't like that most Stitches players were staying in the back line looking for a hook that would lead to kills. I like tanks that stand in the front line, and so when you got this rework, I felt like you're more rewarded for getting in that front line than you are normally, or than you were before. So that's really where I would put Stitches now. I think he's in a really good spot. Albeit probably even a little strong, could potentially see some nerfs in a couple areas. But even with a couple nerfs, I think that he's still going to be a strong frontline tank that is a force to be reckoned with. So this right now, he's just looking for opportunity hooks. They're just waiting for an objective to spawn. They don't really need to push bot. They're going to try to get some value in another lane. They only need to do 2 damage. So if they win the next objective, they win the game. Or if boss spawns in 40 seconds, they win the game. So all they're looking for right now is to potentially get a hook, lead to a pick, and then win the next objective. But they're just playing safe. And if you're wondering, like, this seems like a lot of, like, wasted time, it is and it isn't. The enemies aren't really getting any more value. They already own bottom lane. And his team doesn't need a lot of damage here. So they don't actually need to take back bottom lane. And so they're really safe to play safe here, just because of the lead that he gave his team early game. Well, I say he, but it was a full team effort. I mean, we saw some amazing mind controls coming out from an Inverted. We saw amazing silences coming out from Weary Day, and we also saw a ton of great global potential coming out from, or global plays coming out from Falstad. The next boss is up. We do have Gust available. And we also have the Urel, so they win this next boss, and that closes out this next game. But they could have also just sent one person down bot lane because the Deathwing was already here on boss, and one person would have won there. So they had multiple ways to win this game, and the enemies were kind of checkmated at this point. So with all of that being said, that is new Stitches. I think that he'll likely see a couple nerfs, but I don't think it's going to be the end of the world for him. He's not so strong that he's going to get like destroyed with nerfs, but he definitely is a strong pick right now, and I do think that he'll see some light nerfs that probably won't affect him, and that's why I wanted to get this video out, because I do think that he's in a good spot, and he can definitely be playable in most situations on most maps, while of course being very strong on maps like this, where you get vision on someone who's channeling on a point, and you can hook them from out of vision range. Thank you guys so much. Feel free to subscribe, all of that fun stuff, and I will do my best to get the Vala video out soon.